Welcome everyone to another Sales Hacker webinar. My name is Scott Barker. I head up partnerships and revenue at Sales Hacker, and I'm joined by two awesome guests today. But before I introduce them, what are we talking about? We are going to be talking about how to set up your inbound efforts to make your outbound strategy more effective. So what things can you be doing from your outbound channels that are going to affect, more lead gen for you? And then what can your marketing team and lead gen be doing to help your outbound strategies become more effective? And what we're really going to be running through is best practices for inbound lead handling and processing, and how outreach and lead data, our two guests today, optimize their inbound lead machines for outbound sales. So that's what we're going to be diving into. A few housekeeping matters. Number one, these are all recorded, so you can find them all on our YouTube channel, and we will send them out to you about 24 hours after we wrap up. I usually get at least 12 to 15 emails of people asking me for the recording, so don't worry, it is coming. It just takes a little time to render it and everything. And then last but not least, these conversations are always for the Sales Hacker community. So we want you to get involved. We want to hear from you. There's a little Q&A button just at the bottom of the Zoom there. Jump on, tell us your name, your title, and any challenges that you're having as it pertains to your inbound or your outbound efforts. All right, got that out of the way. Now, my two amazing guests, two good friends of mine. I'm joined by Brian Burkett, who is the SVP of Sales over at Lean Data. Brian, welcome.
Thank you very much for having me. I appreciate it. So as Scott said, I'm Brian Burkett. I lead the sales team at Lean Data, where I've been since the beginning for the last 5.5 years. So when I joined, we were at 0 revenue, and we've scaled today to mid-teens ARR. And I've seen the company grow from sort of seed funding through Series C, which we actually announced yesterday. So super excited to be here to share my stories of building and scaling and trying to do our best around inbound and outbound.
That's awesome. And congratulations again on the Series C. What was it, 27 mil? Just a couple bucks?
27 and a half. Yeah.
27 and a half. Can't forget that half. That's awesome. And funny fact about me and Brian, I had dinner with you in Scottsdale 3 weeks ago. And then we hung out in San Diego last week. And then here we are doing a webinar together. So we've seen a lot of each other over the last while, which is awesome. And then my good friend Dan Ahmadi, who runs business operations. He's the director of business operations over at Outreach. Dan, welcome.
Thank you, Scott. Really excited to be here. As Scott mentioned, I'm Dan Ahmadi, director of business ops here at Outreach. I've been at Outreach for about 2.5 years, and I actually started as director of demand generation, really tasked here to build our inbound lead machine. Before that, I've been at plenty of other companies, different sizes, been in marketing operations, demand gen, marketing programs, and campaigns for about 7 years now. And then fun fact about me is I actually started my career as a chemist. So made a few transitions along the way, and excited to be here to share a little bit of tips and tricks.
That's awesome. And I actually just found out that fun fact today. What have you applied from being a chemist to being now a marketer and in business ops?
Spreadsheets, 100% spreadsheets. Nothing changes.
That's awesome.
Nothing says fun like chemistry.
Yeah, exactly. All right. Well, guys, let's dive right into it. And this will be, just for everyone, this will be a Q&A discussion. So we'll be going back and forth a little bit. So again, please jump into the Q&A section if you have any questions. But before we get too deep into it, I think it's important that we kind of set the stage. So I want to just know, what does inbound mean to both of you? And Brian, I'll start with you. What does inbound mean at Lean Data?
So I think inbound for us is really any activity that's not sort of outbound ADR driven. So when we think about inbound holistically at Lean Data, this can be, the natural one is marketing efforts. So, webinars, response to like invitations to trade shows, content, And then for us, it also means partners. So, what's coming in via the partner channel as well. And I think all of those sort of types of touches and activities fall into the inbound bucket.
Yeah, makes sense. And then just, you used an acronym there, ADR. Not everyone might not be familiar with that one. What's a ADR?
Yeah, so we refer to our SDRs, BDRs as ADRs. ADR stands for account development rep. So our outbound motion is focused across target accounts. So because they're account focused and it's outbound, I can get into that later, we decided to call them account development reps, or ADRs.
Nice. Awesome.
Yeah.
That's it. It's important. It kind of frames their way of thinking and how they look at their position. I like that. I bet we'll see more ADRs pop up after this webinar.
Awesome.
We'll see. Dan, what does inbound mean to you?
Sure. So we have a very similar definition. The only difference I'd say is our inbound at Outreach is defined as interest in our platform that we didn't first target. So completely outside of our outbound named account strategy. Everything else that sort of comes our way. So the difference here is if we do drive a webinar attendee or an event attendee from a target account that already is being targeted via outbound methods, we would still call that meeting and the subsequent deal as an outbound source deal.
Got it. That makes sense. And we'll dive a little bit further into that on how you set up kind of rules of engagement for inbound and outbound, because it can be really important or it can turn into a headache. But before we get there, let's talk about what should people be thinking about, and what's kind of the most important piece in order to be handling inbound properly. And Dan, I'll start with you this time.
So one thing I'd love to mention here is your inbound is going to come in from all sorts of accounts. Some accounts that you didn't know about, some accounts that you do know about. So I think it's really important to marry your two strategies together. And specifically, for example, if an inbound lead comes into your system from an existing outbound account, you already have somebody on the outbound team trying to get their foot in the door with that account. It makes all the sense in the world to take that inbound lead and give it to that rep that's already working that account. So one thing that we did about a year ago or so is transition to a full contact and accounts model, so that we could quickly convert these inbound leads into contacts and then understand the full picture of what's going on with that account and make sure that we are passing that over to the right person who is best suited for moving that business forward.
All right. So yeah, okay, that makes sense. You wouldn't have just like let's say like an MDR or like just a strictly inbound rep that lives in a silo. You need to, open it up so you can see the full picture.
Yeah, I think we initially started down that path was we just drew a line in the sand of inbound and outbound, but then we quickly found out that some of our outbound reps were noticing inbound leads for their accounts and really wanted their hands on those contacts. And we also found that they were really a lot more effective at getting into those accounts because they had the context of the whole business that they were going after, and they could use what they already know to really personalize their outreach and ensure that they put their best foot forward with that contact.
Yeah, it makes sense. And it seems almost obvious, but when you talk to a lot of organizations, and I talk to a lot of organizations, they are still stuck in that line in the sand mentality where it's like, it's inbound. We have inbound reps, they handle it. If it's outbound, it's outbound, which isn't always the best way to do it. Brian, in your eyes, what's kind of the most important piece that people should be thinking about to handle inbound flow properly?
So I think backing up before you get that, I think the most important piece to all of this is what is the customer experience that you're trying to drive. And so for us, as you think about that customer journey, what gives them the best experience? Because when you treat them well, they're going to move through the process or the cycle and hopefully move forward with you. So for us, whether it's inbound or outbound, specifically inbound, something that you can't ignore that people have been talking about forever is speed in which you follow up, right? So, for us, it's like, how quickly can we get them, into our sales engagement platform to make sure that we're following up quickly. And then as Dan talked about, it's all about sort of context and accuracy. So what we're doing in a matter of minutes at Lean Data is when that activity comes across, that lead comes in, we're matching it to the right account so that we can get the context of it. We have a piece of our business which is all around sort of speed to lead and follow-up times. If there is no existing relationship there, we know that speed can kill response time. Same thing if it's not just a lead, it could come in via a chat bot. We're still looking for that context and then following up quickly. Once we have that context, we'll send it to the rep that has the best chance, the most knowledge about that customer to get them to follow up. If it's not an opportunity, that's our ADR team. If there's an open opportunity, we'll bypass inside sales to go, or to the ADR team to go straight to the account executive, or even our customer team. So, the context is almost as important as the speed, but those are the two things that we think are most important with handling any sort of inbound activity.
Mm-hmm. That's an excellent way to look at it and frame it. It doesn't necessarily matter what is, easiest to track for your team or easiest for your team to handle. It's, what is the experience that your buyer or your prospects are having throughout?
Absolutely.
Yeah. And we've already got some questions rolling in, so this is awesome. It's definitely a topic that people are very interested in. And I think this one's for Dan, and it's kind of a two-part. There's two questions here, and I think we can get through both of them in the same. So the first question is from Gordon Jen. Gordon, thank you for the question. How did you get over the fear or challenge chasm from moving from leads to contacts and accounts? So to me, that sounds like, when was the pain of staying the same became greater than the pain of having to do a lot of work to switch it all over?
That's a great question. I think we had to weigh the pros and cons in making that shift. And one big con was that leads are not connected to accounts, as we all know, and they don't have all the context that contacts do. And we were finding examples of duplicates throughout our system where a lead existed for a person and also the same contact existed, and we were reaching out to them with two different records, with two different people and two different messages. And back to what Brian was saying, if you think about what the customer is experiencing and optimizing this for the customer, it made all the sense in the world that we ensure that we convert people so that we minimize the duplicates, and also ensure that our downstream systems like marketing automation could have all the context that we've already collected on the account level. Things like how qualified they are for our business and what existing technology they have, and how large their deployment could be, are all pieces of information that we store on the account level. We also looked at the case where we already have a lot of our records as contacts. You have to convert to contacts anyways if you're moving into an opportunity. So it didn't really make sense to live in both worlds. It did make sense to move it all into one world, and moving from lead to contact, we believe, was the only way to go.
Yeah. And then, so this is kind of a follow-up question to that from Bridget. Thanks for the question, Bridget. So she just, operationally, so do the outbound reps work with contacts in Salesforce exclusively? And do inbound reps still work with leads exclusively? Are there any circumstances in which a rep works with both leads and contacts?
So for outreach, we have the outbound reps working exclusively with contacts. So that part's correct. The inbound side, we have a few reps that handle the remnant inbound interest. They actually have to work in both. Unfortunately, we couldn't get rid of leads entirely. We do have a team of specialists that go through and clean data and ensure that we're converting everybody that we can't with automated means. But in the end, you'll always end up with some records that remain as leads because they're personal email addresses and you don't have too much context. So they're trained to work in both worlds, but everybody else works in contacts and accounts.
So we're actually the same way. And, it's interesting because our Lean Data actually helps a lot of companies with this journey. And I think looking across, our customers, I think that, as much as you want to be 100% contact and account, it's actually impossible. So what we do is, our folks that follow up with inbound, just like Dan, they're trained to work leads and contacts. We also use what's called lead to lead matching to ensure that, hey, if I have an ADR that's talking to a lead because an account hasn't been created yet in the system, we actually route leads from the same company to that person as well. Because as you know, if you keep it in the view of the best customer experience possible, we want to share that knowledge because it helps us move accounts through the cycle, you know, in the best manner possible.
Yeah, yeah, makes total sense. And again, thank you everyone for the questions. We've got about 10 questions already, which is fantastic. But I want to get back to some of the things that we were discussing before, and then hopefully we'll answer some of these questions as we have a discussion. And I'll keep coming back to the community for questions. So do keep them coming, and we'll have a Q&A section at the end. So before we get too down, towards like the solutions of, what the best practices is across the board, let's first talk a little bit about challenges and pitfalls that you both have seen, because I'm sure you've had a few. So what's the biggest challenge when integrating and scaling your inbound and outbound efforts? And Brian, I'll start with you.
Yeah, I mean, I think at the beginning, it's sort of about these rules of engagement, right? Like how do you define your process? And then what are the rules you put in place to make sure that it's repeatable? Especially where, for most organizations, inbound and outbound start by being separated. And then pretty quickly you have to make some decisions. Well, if outbound results in inbound, who gets it? Who should work it? But a lot of those things, when you're thinking about at the beginning, the more thought you can put into it earlier, will sort of help you out, because these ugly rules of engagement issues, when they rise later, it just hurts everybody involved with those things.
Yeah, agreed. Yeah, it hurts the individual SDR, BDR. It hurts you at a company level because you can't fully understand where you should be doubling down on your efforts. Even if something's working, you don't really know necessarily why it's working. So yeah, rules engagement are key. Dan, anything to add there?
Yeah, rules of engagement were big for us as well. We had to go through and understand what our model was before we started this process. One thing I'd add here is one common thing that we see happen is marketing teams associating themselves only to inbound, and then assuming that outbound is on their own. They don't need any help from marketing. They should be able to generate everything on their own. And what that leads to is situations where marketing could be helping the outbound team, but they don't, and instead they focus on whatever the inbound team is doing. So what we've set up is, and what we recommend is not tying to just a team of a subset of the sales team, but tying yourselves to the entire sales team. And that way marketing can do whatever they can to help everybody equally.
Yeah. And that then, Dan, that comes down to kind of the KPIs that marketing is held to. Is that how the solution for that?
Yeah.
Cool. That's awesome. And then do we want to go into at all, like what the actual rules of engagement look like at Lean Data or at Outreach? Brian, I'll start with you on that one. Don't want to go down a rabbit hole, but.
Just like in general, like we are a very target account focused business. Yep. So in most cases, often than not, the owner of the account that has gotten it the furthest typically wins out, as long as they're keeping a decent level of activity. So, if you have a named account, it's yours to work. You're partnering with an ADR on that to get into it. If something comes inbound, it goes back to the person that's doing the outbound.
Yeah, makes sense. And then is there like a 30-day window, 60-day window? Or is it just based on discretion?
No, we have rules around activity, and then each quarter we review our target accounts. So we sort of refresh and move, and then you sort of keep it locked and loaded for a certain amount of time, and then we move things around at the end of that. Yeah,
makes sense. Dan, similar at Outreach?
Similar. We have a static number for each number of accounts for each outbound rep. And as they work those accounts and learn whether they're qualified or unqualified, they can trade in the unqualified accounts for more qualified ones. And then additionally, similar to Brian, if you do not log activity into that account for a period of time, then you may lose it and it may be reassigned to somebody else. And as inbound leads come in, we understand whether it's a member of one of our target accounts. If so, it goes to that rep that's working that account. And if not, everything else is sort of a catch-all with our inbound reps.
So I have a question for you, Dan.
Yeah.
Given that your outreach and you have everybody there has access to this amazing sales engagement tool, do people ever not touch their accounts?
It's rare because it's very easy to create what we call a sales nurture program where, it's sending an email once every month or so, just keeping it active and live for a very long time, which is the actions that we're actually trying to drive anyways. Okay. So it's rare, to answer your question.
And they might not last very long. All right. So again, we've got so many good questions. I like a lot of these. This one's interesting so Matt Rice, thanks for the question. And Dan, I'll start with you on this one. How at Outreach have you been able to increase predictability of your inbound strategy?
Sure. So I believe demand generation and in this case is all about predictability. So we're trying to smooth out the spikes. So we have very defined metrics that we have by month, broken down by how many meetings we get and where we get those meetings. And the campaigns and programs that are running are all meant to be stable. So we're pumping the same amount of budget in, we're refreshing them at the same rate, and we do expect and experience a pretty stable output on the other end. So a lot of companies do leverage their inbound efforts to kind of smooth out the spikes of what's going on the outbound side. And we do, one thing I would love to mention is we do get requests to change our strategy up fairly often. Let's not go after this segment, let's go after that one. Here's a new vertical we learned about. And we try to push back on a lot of those to keep the system as stable and predictable as possible. We keep those kind of cordoned off into small experiments before we roll it out and change our strategy as a whole.
Smart. You try not to be constantly reactive to the other, stakeholders in the organization and more proactive with what works.
Yeah.
Smart. And Brian, question for you here from Lloyd Evans. How do you at Lean Data move accounts and contacts through the pipeline? What are the different stages that you're using?
Yeah, so we have a couple different ways that we look at accounts. It starts with sort of non-target and target accounts. That's sort of the first way. Then we look at actually which are assigned, so what are actively getting worked. We have account ownership that sits with AEs. We have a subset of accounts that sit with ADR only. We have a subset in the middle that's worked by both. So that's the first sort of segmentation of how we look at accounts. And then we even have, enterprise versus mid-market. From there, once they get activated, we really use the meeting as sort of the kickoff into our opportunity stages. So, we have some lead statuses, we have some account statuses as well, all leading up to sort of tracking to the point of getting that qualified meeting. And at that point, it just gets, we create $0 opportunities when meetings are created, and then we track it through with your typical opportunity stages to close.
Yeah. Awesome. Great. And then going back to, so looking at like some of these questions, seems like we have a lot of, sales leaders that have joined us. So how can, sales leader, how can they activate and enable their ops and marketing team to prioritize this inbound kind of ops? And Brian, I'll start with you on that one.
Yeah, so what we did is we have really blended the view of inbound and outbound to where we think about really activated accounts. And so activated accounts are ones that are engaging with us, either responding to emails, whether it's marketing or sales-led emails. And so what we've done is we've tied marketing to generating overall pipeline. So, for us, actually, the outbound is sort of the predictable piece of our business. We know how many meetings we can generate by rep on a monthly basis. And then we sort of inbound is sort of more potentially seasonal, event-based, sort of campaign-based, where it comes and goes. But because of that sort of fluctuation, marketing is tied sort of lockstep to overall pipeline generation. So for us, the strategy is, hey, we just want to activate accounts, whether it's inbound or outbound. It doesn't matter as much as long as the pipeline is being created.
Yeah, makes sense. And Dan, anything that you would add there or that differs?
The only thing I'd add here is I think setting the high-level goals are really important. We have a system at Outreach where our marketing number is tied to the sales number. We really consider it one number. And so there's no scenario where we would consider ourselves hitting our goal if they did not hit theirs. And so from the top, sales operations, marketing, sales are all aligned to work together to reach the goal that we've set for ourselves.
Yeah, makes sense. It's so, have you guys been part of organizations that it's not? I certainly have. And
yes.
When there's two different numbers, and it's so weird when like one team is celebrating and the other one isn't, or vice versa. And it's like, it's like, what world are we living in? It's very odd.
It is very tough to lead a sales team when marketing is celebrating hitting their number and sales is not.
Yeah. I've actually been on both sides of that coin. I've been on a marketing team that's like, yeah, woohoo, because I was leading a BD team that rolled up to marketing, and we'd hit our goals and we were so good, and then sales wouldn't, and they were all like, angry. It causes all this weird friction that doesn't need to be there. And I've been on the opposite side, been a seller, and it's just kind of demoralizing and draws those lines in the sand more. So if you are listening to this webinar and still have different goals, I would urge you to tie those together. And okay, so let's talk about, so we talked a lot about like process, and you need technology to enable those processes to work more effectively. So Dan, what technologies in your experience are really critical to the success of inbound lead handling?
Few things here. I would say some sort of marketing automation solution if you're collecting information online and then processing it, scoring it, analyzing it, and sending it over to your CRM, which would be the next thing, be a CRM.
Yeah.
And if you expect then reps to quickly follow up on those leads, I would say a sales engagement platform. And then the fourth category would be all the systems that help you enrich and route and ensure that the best customer experience is occurring. So lead to account matching, conversions, as well as data enrichment. There's a lot of vendors out there that can add in information like job title or company size, and then that helps you ensure that you're routing it to the right person, and also not asking it from your prospects on your website. Mm-hmm. So those would be my top few.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. And the amount of times I get to a form and it looks too long and I don't complete it is quite a bit. So make sure everyone's thinking about that. Brian, what technologies are critical in your business for inbound lead handling?
I mean, it basically the same stack, marketing automation, CRM. Obviously, the lead routing and lead to account matching is really important to tie back into the outbound. And then for the leads that don't have a lot of info, just like Dan said, the enrichment piece of it. But, quickly and often not, inbound goes stale and turns into outbound efforts. So, then using your normal cast of characters as well, like a sales navigator, because I think you can, inbound and outbound play together so well, right? For us, it's an account focused world. So if someone comes inbound, we don't get their response, we're going to go outbound against other folks at that organization, because we think that that's an indicator that account, might be interested. So we don't stop at just, if it's outbound, we just go outbound. If it's inbound, we just go inbound. It's about integrating the two and taking a holistic approach against that whole account.
Yeah, absolutely. And looking at that intent that they've shown one way or
Correct.
another. Yeah,
Yeah.
great. Okay, so we're talking about this integrated, inbound and outbound, sales motion. And again, going back to like challenges or pitfalls, what are some things when you do integrate, and you take this holistic approach, what are some pitfalls that you've seen? And Dan, I'll start with you.
Sure. So one that comes to mind is about lead scoring. So many marketing teams have set up pretty advanced scoring mechanisms to ensure that leads are ready for sales before they send them over to sales. And when you start doing lead generation for outbound accounts, it's really important to take that into consideration. What we found early on was our outbound reps were saying, I don't really care that this person has only downloaded one piece of content. That's enough for me. It's something. And on the other hand, I'm working working people that have never heard of us. I'm sending a cold email or making a cold call. So anything is better than this. So please hand that over. So your scoring model really needs to be adjusted if you are going to have both leads going to both teams.
Yeah. Brian, anything to add there?
Yeah, I mean, I think getting on the same page as you integrate with your marketing, or maybe it's partner teams, whoever's driving the inbound, is really important. And you have to have really clear definitions around what an ICP account looks like, what is a persona, like taking time to document all of that so it's crystal clear, and then having SLAs around that. Because as quickly as things scale, like the volume overtakes, and people, as you add new people, they start to do weird things. But being able to go back to that and having a clear definition of like, hey, here's the accounts we're going after. Here are the people that we're going after. And just making sure that you're lockstep with your, sort of your interdependent departments is super important, because you'd be surprised that like you could go a year and then like, oh, I thought we were selling to these guys. And maybe, the team is thinking something else. So pretty basic, but super important.
Yeah, no, I would definitely agree. And it's funny when you do those kind of internal audits on like, hey, and you ask 10 different AEs or BDRs, what is our ICP? And you get 10 different answers.
Absolutely.
It's scary. Okay, this is a question I wanted to get both your opinions on. Having, led BD teams in the past, played around with a few different comp structures, this is something that actually comes up quite a bit. What does a comp structure look like for an inbound versus an outbound rep? And Brian, I'll start with you and how you guys look at it at Lean Data.
Yeah, so our business grew outbound first, which I think is important. So there are businesses out there that start with inbound, and those I will be extremely jealous of for the rest of my sales career. We didn't have that luxury. So we went outbound to inbound. So inbound has sort of been scaling over time. And so we've landed on a point where we know that basically the conversion rates of inbound and the ease at which it comes in, the quotas are about 2 to 1 higher for an inbound rep than an outbound rep.
Yeah.
So that's how we think about it. We think inbound is an easier job, so we compensate a little bit less than our outbound reps, but from a quota perspective, it's about 2 to 1 for our organization.
Yeah, makes sense. And then one follow-up question to that. Do you, because a lot of people have different takes on it, because it kind of requires two different skill sets. The inbound is like speed, process driven, and then outbound, you have to be okay with rejection and be able to have a high level conversation with a stranger. Do you see one as like a promotion? Do you promote like inbounds to outbounds, or is it the other way around, or are they two different kind of career tracks in your mind?
Well, I think it can be two different career tracks, actually. And inbound could actually roll up into a demand gen team at some point, because I think they're looking at, really following up on campaign-based things. They're really tied closely to the marketing team. That being said, we can also promote from inbound to outbound. But when I think about these account development reps, whether it's inbound or outbound, what I'm looking for to take that next step to AE is like, do they really understand can they identify an ICP account, whether it's coming in or they're targeting it? right? Do they know what a potential lean data customer looks like? And then do they know how to send a personalized response based on the company, the persona, things like that? So the job, regardless of how it comes in, those are the skills that I'm looking for them to gain. So if they do that, they can rise up through the sales org.
Yeah, cool. And Dan, going back to the original question about comp structure versus inbound and outbound, what does it look like at Outreach?
Sure. So we were similar to Brian, an outbound first company as well. And our inbound at the time was just one offer, which was demo request. So our inbound reps were just taking the demo requests and scheduling them. So because of that, and the relative effort required to get an outbound meeting versus an inbound meeting, our comp structure was set more closely to 10 to 1. And actually what we found is, as we've rolled out additional ways for people to become leads from an inbound means, things like downloading content, attending webinars, coming to trade shows, it's a very different follow-up process, and different levels of effort are required. So we have programs where we do double or triple the quota credit for those kinds of records. They're a little bit higher in the funnel. So that's primarily how we've broken it down. And then I think you're also asked about inbound and outbound, whether they're career paths that are connected to each other. Mm-hmm. We see those as two different careers, and when we're interviewing and recruiting, we're looking for two different types of skill sets for each role. And similar to Brian, as he mentioned, we do have examples where our inbound reps are being promoted into marketing and demand gen for events or lead generation programs. And our outbound reps are often take the AE or the inside sales rep route.
Yeah, makes sense. I like that point on, not treating every inbound lead as like equal, right? Like a demo request is going to be much easier for them to flip than, let's say, an ebook download or an event scan. That's cool.
That's right. It really is connected to the level of effort required, I think.
Yeah, totally. All right, so switching gears a little bit, we've got about 15-ish minutes, a little over 15 minutes. Switching gears to everyone's favorite topic, attribution, which is can be a sore spot for a lot of marketing teams, sales teams who source this, who gets credit for it. And I know we talked a little bit about everyone getting tied to the same number, which is like critical. But Brian, how do you look at attribution when it comes to to a source of a new opportunity?
Yeah, so we actually separate out those two things. So our marketing team is tied to multi-touch attribution pipeline. So pipeline generation. So that means prior to an opportunity created, did they have a relevant marketing touch point? Because we want to be lock and step on those opportunities and accounts together. So what that looks like is in parallel, our customer journey during that, customers and prospects are reaching out to us through marketing channels and through sales efforts at the same time. That's our ideal journey, and that's why they're compensated on multi-touch attribution. Now, we look at sourced slightly differently. Sourced is what was that, it's almost like that magical moment of conversion. If you were to pick sort of what was the key event in getting them into that opportunity. And from that perspective, it's a little tighter window. We look at, for marketing, it's things like demo requests, contact us form, as well as, like a meeting request at a trade show. Things where we overlap with the outbound team tend to get sourced as outbound credit. And then we have a partner channel as well, which can also receive sourcing credit if the request comes in from a partner. And then the latest thing we're looking at is how do we tie source to customer referrals? As our customer base has grown, we're seeing more and more people come in directly from customer referral. So we break source down that ways. And so it's not a who sourced it. I mean, it's more of an idea of like, how can we get more of that? It's not a credit thing. So marketing is just tied to being lock and step with us. but we want to understand source so that we can generate more through it through all our channels.
Yeah, makes sense. So you look at source as more showing you what is working versus you get credit, we get credit.
Absolutely.
It's what's working and we can double down.
Yeah, and I think it's always a tough discussion when you talk about source between teams, and handling it this way allows us all to come to the table and realize that, hey, if it's all sales source, we're okay with that, but we want to understand, how do we drive more marketing sourced or partner sourced?
Yeah, I think it's a great way to look at it. Dan, look at it a similar way.
Similar way, we also have a multi-touch attribution system in place. And so we're tracking all the different touch points that are happening on our website and offline events like events and webinars, etc. All of those are being logged in Salesforce as touch points from the marketing team. And then also, since we're using Outreach internally, all of the sales attempts to get in contact with people are also being logged as activities. So calls, emails, meetings, etc. And then we use that information, the conglomeration of both those data sets, to understand what actually happened with this account leading up to them accepting a meeting with us. And so similar to Brian, it's really not about marketing versus sales. It was more about how do we ensure that we are incrementally helping the sales team, not just claiming a bunch of work that they're already doing. And so we employed a 30-day look back window right before the meeting is booked, where we analyze the activities logged against that person and the account, as well as the marketing touch points that have been logged against the person and the whole account. And then just have an agreed upon model between marketing and sales as to how this gets categorized. Essentially, we just want to know, did we get this meeting because marketing did something and then sales followed up and then we got this meeting? Or is it because sales first was reaching out and then they got interested in our marketing and then booked a meeting? So that's really just the line for us in the sand to understand how we're incrementally helping. And then for optimization, though, we don't care about where the meeting was sourced. We look at it in a similar way that Brian's company looks at it, with all meetings, all attribution, all touch points, and we're just trying to see where can we optimize, what things can we increase and what things can we decrease to better allocate our existing budget toward meeting growth. Yeah.
Makes sense. Again, great way to look at it. All right, so I do one more question and then we'll go to Q&A. And you can take this one whichever way you want. It's intentionally vague. What's one piece of advice to people trying to really balance the inbound and outbound efforts? And Brian, I'll start with you.
I don't know if you can achieve balance. And so I think that, like, personally, I'd much rather try to build an outbound motion because you have more control over it, and then look at inbound as sort of gravy on top of that. So I'm, just through the history of my career, having seen inbound and outbound organizations, like you can control outbound. You can, if you have a really good marketing team, you can dial up inbound, but it seems to me that, like, it's a little easier to control outbound than it is to control inbound. So I look at inbound as gravy on top of what we're doing from the outbound side. Yeah.
So build that repeatable, scalable outbound, and the inbound that comes is just supplementing those efforts that are already going.
Absolutely.
And Dan, I have a idea you may have a different viewpoint on that, because you do believe in predictable and scalable inbound.
Yeah, I think my one piece of advice would be go after what's lowest hanging fruit for your company. You may have an existing inbound engine that needs a tune-up that can generate more for you. Mm-hmm. And likewise, you may already have talent on your team that is doing really well on the outbound side. And so helping them with more resources could get a lot more output for your company. So it's dependent on which company you're at. Mm-hmm. But I would say that don't ignore inbound, because it may be the slower channel, but over time it ends up being a more revenue efficient channel than scaling an outbound team.
Absolutely.
And we're talking like years timelines.
Yeah, totally. So yeah, it's interesting. You can it's almost taking what you both are actually kind of on that same page, just keeping that outbound engine flowing the whole time, but don't ignore this one because over time it can, start to balance out, but it could take years, and not all companies have years.
In a perfect world, your inbound provides more leverage than an outbound team because outbound is really expensive and human, right? Yeah. Inbound efforts, once you figure it out, can get cranking and be predictable.
Yeah. All right, that was awesome. And so we've got some time to get through these questions. Again, thank you everyone for the crazy level of engagement on this one. All right, so we've got a good question here from Liz. Liz, thank you so much for the question. It's all about speed to lead, this one. What is your optimal speed to lead timeline if your team cannot reach the prospect right after the inbound is submitted? Maybe it's off hours or something. Dan, you want to take that one?
So the optimal time, in my opinion, is while the person is still at their computer or on their phone, right? They still have the device in their hand. They just submitted something. They just showed some activity. That's a time where if their phone rings, they'll answer and they'll be impressed by how fast you followed up. Oftentimes that means we're talking minutes, right? And so we actually, our marketing operations team put a tremendous amount of effort last year to optimize every step in our funnel leading up to that first call or that first email. And we got it down to about 2 minutes. And I think we reached the point where it's diminishing returns to get faster than this. So optimal time for us is 2 to 5 minutes, ensuring that something goes out. So one thing that I also thought I heard was if it's off hours, what do you do? So we have, in certain cases, we've deferred to sending an email first from the right rep with a follow-up attempt, and also asking them to make a call at the same time. So if it is off hours, at least the email still went out and now they've moved on to an email conversation, and we're not waiting for a call to be placed the next business day.
Yeah. And is that fully just automated? That's just like a trigger that will go out from their account?
Fully automated.
Nice.
If you're waiting for reps to notice activity in a lead report, and then take action on it, you'll notice that your follow-up times will definitely be in the hours or greater.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Brian, speed to lead at Lean Data, what do you kind of coach against?
Well, I mean, I think for us, it comes down to context again. So I would rather give up a few minutes to have it go to the right person and get a personalized, customized response, especially if we're already in cycle with them. So if it's an active opportunity. What we do at Lean Data and what we see across all our customers is that if there is no context, the faster you follow up, the better. So we will, basically just use round robin and notifications to ensure that it goes to somebody during those working hours that can respond as fast as possible. And I think, what you need to understand is what part of your business really requires speed to lead follow-up, and then what piece of your business requires more contextualized, thoughtful follow-up, because there's different pieces that require different motions. And you'll get into trouble if you're just like, hey, I just want to follow up with everybody quickly, because you very rarely keep the relevance. And at the same time, you're going to miss opportunities if you take the time to just, customize and look up everything for some responses. So, as you're thinking about your go-to-market motion, who are the people you want to follow up quickly, have a process for that, and then who are the people that need a more sort of account-centric approach and follow-up and manage that process separately.
Yeah, totally. Kind of like the white glove approach versus just, a normal kind of, makes sense. And Dan, I'm going to flip this one back to you because you're the numbers guy. You're my scientist over there. Do you have any numbers around, this is a pushback question from Michael. Michael Jacobs, thanks for the question. Do you have some numbers around conversion rate improvements driven from when you had that 2-minute response time, what you guys have now, like the right away versus like the hours? So when you went through that optimization process, do you remember any of the numbers and conversion rate improvements?
I don't have the numbers off the top of my head here, but I do know that what we were noticing when we had longer follow-up times were people actually telling us like, hey, I requested a demo from you and from 2 other vendors. They got back to me faster, so I'm going with them. And that was particularly painful for our leadership team to see. And so since we've made it faster, we see no more of those. And we presume that our conversion rates have also gone up as a result. I believe they're measured somewhere, but I don't know the numbers.
Yeah, fair enough. I thought you just live in a world of 10 monitors and spreadsheets. And you could just have them all.
I think we saw this across our customers where there are highly competitive sort of technologies out there where people are filing multiple demo requests across those companies. So think like telephony, potentially sales engagement as well. One of our customers was saying that if the company to respond first wins 70% of the time.
Wow.
So that's in those competitive situations, and it makes sense,
Yeah. Totally. Yeah, especially in the sales engagement category, because that's kind of what you're teaching that motion. And, so, yeah. Awesome. Okay. This is a good question from Peter around something, Brian, you touched on just very, very briefly around referrals. And his questions around referral generation. Any advice on how you guys marry inbound and outbound processes with getting referrals from current customers? And do you guys consider this lead source completely independent of your inbound or outbound efforts? Brian, I'll start with you.
So we do, from a source perspective, we're thinking about it as a separate source, right? Okay. And I think it's something that it's so valuable and so important. We're thinking about the best way to capture this. So we're looking at things we can do to sort of better understand who the individuals are in our customers that are using us, so that when they do move on, we can actually stay ahead of it. Nice. Oftentimes they end up showing up as sort of inbound because they're the ones, they'll move to a company, they'll fill out a demo request, and then we'll find out that they used us before. So from an attribution perspective, it gets sort of all lumped in together with sort of inbound. Then from a source perspective, that's one of the things that we need to do a better job of figuring out, is how to capture that so we can sort of separate that segment and then do a better job of getting more of it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's definitely a strong motion for outbound, is, when you have those champions that move on to their next gig, is getting in front of them super quick is key. Dan, any other thoughts there?
No, we're still figuring this out on our side. I think one area of focus for us has been tracking those champions as they change companies, and then reaching them very quickly. So we're still trying to figure that out.
Yeah. But it's on the radar.
Of course.
This is a question from Hanumant. Hanumant, thank you for the question. And Brian, again, this is going back to something that you said earlier when you were talking about creating opportunities. And the question is, don't you think creating opportunities with a zero value will inflate the pipeline? How sure are we these are actually qualified enough if we're not giving them a value?
So it doesn't inflate the dollars in our pipeline. It will increase the number of opportunities, but we just had to adjust our reports to look at when an amount was added to the pipeline. So we create the $0 op when the meeting is scheduled. When the meeting's completed, we bump up the value on the opportunity, and all our reports are ran off of that amount added status, so that we can always see the number of $0 ops as a precursor to pipeline, but all our pipeline reports are off of that key moment when the dollar value is added, signifying a qualified opportunity.
Makes sense. And basically the reasoning behind the $0 ops is really just so anything moving forward is going to get pushed to that opportunity, and there's not going to be disparate kind of it's sort of insider Salesforce stuff, but we were tracking meetings as activities, and we just felt it was better for our business to track it as an earlier stage opportunity. Yeah, makes sense. Dan, same line of thinking?
We do the same thing. We feel like if you create an opportunity right when you have the meeting booked, you automatically have this place to start storing all the context and information about that meeting. Perhaps the person you're meeting with switches with somebody else. You don't need to then transfer all of their info from a contact record to another. It's already on the op. And similar to lean data, when it's a $0 opportunity, it shouldn't affect any pipeline numbers until after the meeting, where we put in some estimates of what we think that meeting was worth going forward.
If you make the change, you will have to remember that date, because all your reports prior to that will be different. So sometimes, when we go way far back, like, how come the report doesn't work anymore? Something to keep in mind.
Good point. All right, we probably have time for two more questions. And of course, if there is so many questions. So if you want to continue the conversation quickly, Dan, what's the best way to get in touch with you?
Email is probably the best. It's my first name dot last name at outreach.io.
Cool. And Brian?
It's just my first name at leandatainc.com. Perfect.
And connect with these two gentlemen on LinkedIn as well. All right, this is an interesting one that I've actually had some pain in the past with some reps. With the fluctuation that can exist within inbound leads, how do you enable your inbound rep to achieve their number during those lulls in lead volume? Brian, you want to tackle that one?
Yeah, so I think you hire for the lulls.
Yeah.
And not necessarily for the spikes. I mean, it starts with headcount planning. So we're really conservative when it comes to hiring inbound reps. We want a certain amount of inbound activities. We know exactly when to hire an additional headcount. So we basically wait till we see it and the inbound rep is getting close to 200% of plan before we even bring on that second headcount.
Yeah, makes sense. So look at it as if the lulls were all the time and then hire against that. Yeah, smart.
And it's the bigger quota for the inbound rep.
Yeah, exactly. Dan, any insight there?
Sure. Two ways we're achieving this is our inbound reps have a higher percentage of base salary compared to commission. And so it's a less variable part of their comp anyways. And secondly, we do try to keep the lulls from happening, right? I think we try to prevent them from happening by keeping all of our other programs as stable as we can. That being said, we did have one or two that happened anyways, and we just rolled out programs where they could reach out to other contacts that were older and reactivate leads that they had from the past, and just to fill the gap and move forward.
Yeah, awesome. All right, last question here from Kyle Boyd. This sounds like an age-old alignment question. Kyle Boyd is saying, we use Pardot for grading and scoring, as well as all our marketing efforts, but our sales team are still largely reliant on their outbound efforts on cold leads, and they haven't yet quite opted in to the marketing side of the house. Any tips on bringing these two efforts together? And Brian, I'll start with you. It sounds like a marketing sales alignment issue.
Yeah. I mean, so I would encourage the marketing team to sit with the reps while they call through their lead scored leads. And I think quickly either the sales team will see that they're missing out on some low-hanging fruit, or the marketing team will see that they need to tweak their scoring. I think, more often than not, everybody has the right intentions. But if the sales team is not going to ignore good leads if they think they're good. So my thought there is just, inspect it, like actually sit with the reps, take a look at it, dive in, and then maybe there's some things, how come you're not calling on this lead? What is it that you don't like? And then maybe they can adjust the score. Or the sales team will see that there are these great leads sitting in front of them that they just don't know are out there or how to follow up with.
Yeah, great advice. Both teams get in the trenches together and work it out. Dan, thoughts here?
I think Brian nailed it. Sitting with the team and understanding how they're following up, what they're saying, and then what the prospects are saying in response is really important. We actually shifted responsibility for follow-up content from sales to marketing. So when marketing develops a new piece of content or a new program, they're also responsible for writing and delivering all the follow-up content, what we say on the phone, the call scripts, the email language. And then what we did to kind of ensure that that was working was actually listen in on calls, go through, read the emails, read the responses, make tweaks, ensure that they're really best equipped to handle the leads that we're handing over. And that, I think, gains buy-in over time.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And all right, that's perfect. That takes us right to our hour. Brian and Dan, thank you so much for hanging out with us for the last hour. Your insight and time is very much appreciated.
Thank you.
Thank you. It was fun.
Awesome. And everyone who joined us, there was a lot of you today. Thank you very much, and have an awesome rest of your week. And if any of this was hitting home, make sure you check out Lean Data and Outreach.io. A lot of the problems and things we discussed about their solutions will help out with. So go take a look at them, and have a great rest of your week.